This is Brian Carlton for ABN Newswire. I'm back at Sydney's Bowlers Club of New South Wales for another Symposium Resources Roadshow. One of the presenting companies, China Yunnan Copper, or CYU is the ASX listing. CYU has goals of resource definition and development for its three target commodities: high quality copper, gold and uranium, predominantly in Queensland. Its managing director, Mr Beckton, is a geologist with more than 17 years experience in exploration, project development, production and management in Australia, Mexico, and more recently was manager Chile for Exeter Resource Corporation, leading the team responsible for a commercial discovery which ongoing drilling has revealed an inferred estimate of 12.65 million gold equivalent ounces. Mr Beckton, welcome to ABN Newswire.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for your time.
You've got a very large Chinese backer. How did that come about?
Well, what's happening is in boom markets, particularly Chinese state-owned enterprises are looking to emulate the success, say, of Vale of moving offshore. And the best way to do that, and this is a good tick for the Australian Stock Exchange, is they want to get involved in publicly listed transparent companies that are involved in exploration. But it also was timing. We were ready to list in mid-2007, and then the Yunnan Group had been in Australia for 5 years searching for the right vehicle to get involved with. And so I've come back to Australia to head that up. And it's not unique, you do see it in other groups with Cornerstone investments. Sure. The good thing about these guys is they're miners and processors with annual revenues of over $6 billion US, so they're interested in keeping it all going. And
there's no problem in the relationship with the Chinese, given the different culture, different language?
I mean, I've worked with a lot of cultures in my career, as you alluded to in the intro, and the key thing is about these guys is they're mining businessmen. So of course there's cultural differences, but they're usually interesting differences. But when it comes down to it, they're commercial copper operators just like us.
Now the parent company, Yunnan Copper Industry Group, had an amazing year last year. Can you just throw some of the numbers around?
Well, some of their production stats are getting towards the well over 500,000 tonnes of copper produced. Their annual revenues are up and down between 4 and 6 billion US per annum.
So that makes them, what, the third largest copper
producer in China? Yeah. They're a provincial copper company, although mainly in Yunnan, although they also have projects in Sichuan and Laos, and a smelter in Zambia in Africa. So they're already an international company. But key for CYU, our company, is that they previously hadn't been investing in the exploration sphere.
So they obviously see you as a pretty good deal.
Yeah, well, I think the key point is we were a relatively small investment, obviously high risk because we were an exploration company, although we'll talk about how we've gone beyond that now. But they're keen to get involved from the ground up, from an early stage as an investor, but also involved in management, etc.
As a result of this, CYU's going massively into Queensland. What are the highlights there?
Well, Queensland's important because what we're looking for is copper, gold, uranium, and you've got to have the right rocks. So we've got a solid team, but the company floated off an original shelf company called Mt Isa Gold on 2,000 square kilometres. We've refined that, turned the ground over. We've dropped 60% of our ground, but also added that 60% through a refinement process, if you like. So it's a normal exploration process of ranking and hitting targets, and the results are starting to bear fruit.
And what are your operations in China itself?
In China, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Yunnan Copper Group, who have, frankly, too many projects to deal with for their team. And they have an exploration division similar to ours, who are keen for us to be involved. And they know we've had discovery success, particularly in Latin America and Europe, in our team. And so they want to be involved with, if you like, it'll be a two-way relationship, which I know the Australian government's very keen on, where we see shareholders being exposed to more advanced assets than we have here in Australia in Yunnan.
And your ties to Chile haven't evaporated either. You've obviously got a love for the place, but you're still working there, still operating there?
Yeah, although I'd emphasise it's not geotourism. Chile's one of the best places to look for copper in the world. They're the dominant copper producer. Obviously, I speak the language. We can operate there. Our exploration managers also speaks the language. We know what we're doing, and as a result, we went through a 2-year process of reviewing projects, not only in Chile but Australia and China, and the recent Humitos porphyry copper purchase is a result of that hard work.
More broadly, where do you see resources going in the next 12 to 24 months? I'm reading some very bullish assessments of what's likely to happen with the Chinese economy, particularly the demand for resources from Australia. You're obviously very confident that will ride out the little ripple we've had in the past couple of years, and it'll kick back in boom-wise.
Well, crystal balling in terms of prices and metals is notoriously difficult.
Always fraught with difficulty, I understand, but just very generally, over a couple of year period, you'd have to see an upward trend.
Well, there's a structural shortage of good copper deposits, and this is why we haven't rushed out and acquired low quality assets. So it all gets back to quality, and the key point is no one's really doing significant greenfields exploration anymore. Everyone's only exploring around their mines. So all we're seeing out there is peripheral addition of capacity in terms of copper resources. That's not talking about gold and uranium, which is a separate issue.
Yep.
So there's a critical supply problem, and therefore prices will be affected by that in the future, I think.
Let's talk about gold. It went completely ballistic during the global meltdown. As the global economy starts to pick up again, do you see the price coming off a bit?
Well, I don't know which parts of the globe you see coming back, but there's certainly a lot of softness out there in currencies. Whether it's a euro, Aussie dollar, I'm not an expert in this area, but I can say that gold basically was a fairly linear trend through the bust and the boom, which is unusual. And all I know about gold is, and being a development geologist and a production geologist in the past, is it's easy to find relatively to copper, and it's easy to mine relatively to copper. So business-wise, it's lower risk.
Let's talk uranium for a second. There's about 44 odd power reactors coming online around the world. The demand for uranium globally is going to increase significantly. Do you see any relaxation of the regulations here in Australia in terms of our ability to not only mine it but export?
Well, certainly uranium is a political issue, and I represent shareholders, not voters, but I can say that uranium is a critical part of a clean, green future. And it's also very important for medicines, etc., nuclear medicines,
Absolutely.
where Lucas Heights here in Sydney saves people's lives. So I'm a big fan of the industry. Obviously, I've seen the way the Canadians have grown their industry while ours has stagnated, and that's obviously a source of frustration.
Indeed.
However, I think there's some good people working on trying to come up with a practical national solution rather than the state-based choppiness we have at the moment.
This is something I could talk to you about for hours. We're not going to have that much time. What was the essence of your presentation today? What are the 2 or 3 key points you're trying to get across to those with some cash that you'd like to put into your company?
Well, as I say to people, we floated with 0 resources, and we're about to graduate beyond that to announce 2 resources in the short term. One in the uranium rare earth element front, and one in the copper front. So the key point was value add.
Yep.
We're going from 0 prospects to discovery to announcing resources, and as every mining investor knows, the best way to add value is discovery and coming up with resources, not necessarily acquisitions, although that can be important. So the key point was discovery and normal increase in value of the company as a result.
Do you see any ongoing problems more broadly with some of the bottlenecks we had during the resources boom prior to the bust? There were infrastructure bottlenecks all over the country, ports particularly. Is that likely to be an issue for you, or do you think there'll be a more integrated plan to effectively improve the infrastructure to get rid of those bottlenecks? Because it is having an impact on the nation's productivity.
It is certainly, although we're in the base metals and precious metals game, and they're by definition not bulk commodities. It's only the bulk commodities guys that get like coal and iron that really get hurt by bottlenecks. When it comes to a gold mine, the physical volume of the material produced is minimal, and copper is not much more. So we're into high value, smaller volume production assets, and they're generally not affected by infrastructure problems like that. So certainly we're supportive of initiatives to free up bottlenecks, but it doesn't materially affect our industry.
You've got some interest in gems in Cloncurry in Queensland. What's happening there?
Well, we've got what's known as a virgin discovery. So we found a copper deposit that we've named Gem, or it was named Gem by the government earlier, and this is going to be drilled out and announced as a resource. It's very important to go from something that was a surface occurrence but mainly covered by only 4 metres, and that will come out as an inferred resource initially, and we'll grow that in a transparent way with continued drilling. It's only 900 metres from the bitumen, it's only 4 kilometres from the water pipeline to the extractor operations. So logistics are a snap, and it's an excellent little discovery. We'll keep building on it.
Jason Beckton, Managing Director, China Yunnan Copper Australia Limited. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brian.
This is Brian Carlton for ABN Newswire.